He slammed his fist against the bar so hard that the bottles rattled on the shelves. The sound cut through the din of laughter, pool balls clacking, and the low murmur of a baseball game on the television. "Oh, this is your legendary Chuck Norris?" he shouted, his words already slurred by beer. "An old man who can't even hold a drink right." The insult ricocheted across the room, and for a moment the air thinned into silence sharp enough to slice. A few men at the bar chuckled nervously. One woman covered her mouth. The bartender, who'd been drying a glass, froze in place. It was late evening in Austin, a Thursday, when the regulars stayed late, and the smoke of cheap cigars lingered longer than the patrons. The floorboards were sticky with spilled beer. The neon sign outside flickered in and out, bathing the windows in restless red light. Everyone had been relaxed, until the boxer decided to make himself heard. He was local, well-known, his picture in a few gym windows around town. He wore his reputation like a second skin, leaning heavy on it with every swaggering step. His shirt clung with sweat from drinking too much, but his arms still carried the muscle memory of the ring. His voice was loud, cocky, rehearsed for attention. Across the room in the corner booth near the jukebox that hadn't worked in years, sat the man he mocked. Chuck Norris, simple plaid shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow, posture neither slouched nor rigid. He had come quietly, almost unnoticed, nursing a glass of water more than whiskey. No entourage, no spotlight, no hint that the man was anything more than another tired Texan finishing his night. But his name had a way of carrying weight, even when he didn't speak it. The boxer grinned wide at the silence he'd created. He turned in a slow circle, arms lifted, waiting for laughter to follow. A few of his friends at the pool table clapped him on the back, goading him on. "Tell him, champ," one called out. Chuck lifted his eyes, just enough for the room to catch it. He didn't frown, didn't smirk, didn't move at all beyond that simple glance. But the look was enough to change the temperature of the air. For 3 seconds, no one breathed. The boxer misread the quiet. He mistook it for approval. He raised his glass in a toast to himself and shouted again. "What? Nothing to say, old man? Legends don't stay legends forever." This time the laugh came louder, but uneven. Some joined in. Others shifted uncomfortably on their stools. One older man muttered into his beer, "He don't know who he's talking to." The bartender risked a glance at Chuck. Still, he didn't move. His hands rested calmly on the table, the glass untouched. That calmness began to work on the crowd. The louder the boxer barked, the more noticeable the silence at the corner booth became. Tension moved through the bar like a current under floorboards. The television commentators' voices blurred in the background, announcing a double play in the baseball game. Nobody listened. All eyes, even those pretending not to watch, circled back to the same spot. The quiet man and the loud one circling him with words. Chuck's stillness wasn't weakness. It was weight. And the boxer, though he didn't yet realize it, was pulling against something immovable. The boxer laughed again, too loud, and slammed his glass down. Foam spilled across the counter. "See? He won't even look at me. You're just a story, Norris. A movie. Out here, in the real world, you're nothing." A low whistle cut the air. Someone muttered, "Careful now." Chuck finally turned his head fully toward him. Not fast, not dramatic, just a shift, slow enough to make the boxer's grin falter. His gaze held steady, flat, unblinking. No one in the bar spoke. Even the television felt quieter, the play-by-play swallowed by the silence. The young boxer shifted his stance, laughed nervously, and tried again to provoke. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Chuck said nothing. His silence filled the room more completely than any shout. And in that silence, everyone understood the same thing. Something was going to happen. The boxer tilted his head, gesturing toward Chuck's table as if inviting him to move. His bravado cracked just enough to show through. "Come on, old man. Show us you're not all myth." Still, Chuck didn't rise. His chest lifted once with a measured breath. His hands remained flat against the table, but his eyes never left the younger man. The quiet had grown unbearable. Even those who wanted to laugh now found themselves unable. Glasses clinked softly as people set them down, unwilling to miss what might come next. A young woman near the door whispered, "He's not joking." Her date, eyes fixed on Chuck, shook his head slowly. The boxer clenched his fists, restless energy spilling out of him. He thrived on noise, on response, on the spark of escalation. But against silence, his fire stumbled. And then Chuck's lips parted. His voice was calm, level, carrying through the bar without strain. "I didn't come here to fight." The words landed heavier than fists. For a second, the boxer froze. Then he barked a laugh, trying to drag the crowd back to his side. "Hear that?" He's scared to even stand up. Shouts followed from the back, half mocking, half encouraging. "Yeah, make him stand." Chuck exhaled slowly, pushed his chair back, and rose to his feet. The sound of wood against wood seemed louder than it should. He stood straight, neither threatening nor retreating, just present, and the bar fell into complete silence. Every head turned, every breath held. The boxer's grin twitched, uncertain. The moment stretched, fragile and electric, balanced on the edge of the first move. Just wondering, "Where are you watching from?" "Write it down, Bello." The boxer finally broke the standoff. He shoved away from the bar, weaving through the crowd until he towered over the corner booth. Sweat glistened on his brow, his jaw set with drunken bravado. He bent down just enough so his words would carry to every ear. "You're nothing but a legend on a screen," he sneered, voice thick with beer. "Real fighters bleed under house lights, not in front of cameras." Glances darted around the room. Pool cues froze mid-stroke. Glasses hung suspended halfway to lips. Even the television above the bar seemed quieter. The crack of a bat muffled beneath the weight of the moment. Chuck didn't answer right away. His hands rested calm against the table. His eyes lifted slowly, and up close the lines on his face looked carved rather than worn. When he spoke, it was even, almost tired. "I didn't come here to fight." The boxer grinned wider, spinning toward the crowd like a showman hitting a punchline. "Hear that?" He came to hide. Nervous chuckles broke out. A young man near the pool table hollered, "Tell him, Max!" And the boxer's name spread through the whispers. Max soaked it in, chest expanding with the fuel of recognition. But the other half of the room told a different story. At the bar, older men folded their arms, jaws tight. One muttered into his beer, "He doesn't know who he's talking to." The tension built until the bar itself became a third presence. You could feel it in the way chairs shifted, in the half-raised phones under tables, in the bartender's hand hesitating near a stack of napkins like a man bracing for blood. Max pressed closer. His voice rose a notch. "You're comfortable when the director yells cut. Out here? You're just a rumor." The line earned him laughter, but it didn't touch the man across from him. Chuck's head tilted, eyes steady. He glanced once at Max's stance, feet set, fists curling unconsciously, then back to the crowd that had tightened into a ring without meaning to. "This is a bar," Chuck said evenly, "not a gym." The home run call from the television sputtered into silence as the bartender killed the sound. All that remained was the drone of a ceiling fan and the wet clink of ice shifting in the bin. Max leaned so close Chuck could feel the heat of his breath. "Then stand up and prove me wrong." Voices flared behind him. "Yeah, stand up." "Come on!" The fuse had caught. Chuck's chair scraped the floorboards as he rose. The sound was soft but final, louder than the shouts. He didn't square up. He didn't raise his fists. He simply stood, shoulders broad, posture straight, his eyes locked. The silence that followed was heavier than noise. For 3 long beats Max hesitated. He licked his lips, tried to twist the tension into comedy. "What's the matter, old man? Hands too brittle?" A woman at the end of the bar flinched. The man beside her traced a finger along his glass, but said nothing. Chuck's reply was steady. "Go home." The words weren't a challenge. They were a verdict. Max threw back his head in laughter. "He can't," he told the room, arms wide like a preacher at the pulpit. "He won't." The crowd responded with a chorus of boots shifting, stools scraping, and phones held high, their screens glowing like moth wings. Someone whispered, "Careful now." The bartender spoke at last, voice low but firm. "Back it up, Max." Max didn't. He shrugged out of his jacket and tossed it onto a chair. His movements carried the rehearsed confidence of a man who had done this too many times in gyms, too many times under bright lights. He walked toward the center of the floor, where the broken jukebox cast its dead glow. He lifted his hands high, bouncing lightly on his toes, playing to the circle that formed instinctively around him. "Real world now," he declared. "No cameras to save you." Chuck didn't move from the edge of the shadow. His arms hung loose at his sides, elbows relaxed, weight evenly spread. His calmness filled the gaps Max's noise couldn't reach. "Last chance," Chuck said softly. "Don't do this." The warning made a few men glance nervously toward the door, ready to slip out before the first blow. But Max only smiled, tasting pride in stale beer. "You blinked," he lied. "That's enough for me." The bartender slid napkins across the bar, surrendering to inevitability. The ice machine's hum became a clock ticking down. Max bounced once more, then lunged forward, chin high, selling it for the crowd. He planned a glancing touch, just enough to humiliate without damage, a move to write the story in his favor. But the lack of response froze him. Chuck didn't flinch, didn't shift. The absence of movement made the room tilt. Max hesitated mid-step, the weight already committed. His pride forced him onward. He curled his fist, swung out, not a knockout punch, just a cuff meant to sting. The crowd held its breath, and that was the moment everything tipped into the inevitable. Max's punch came sloppy, more theater than violence. A cuff meant to graze and humiliate, to earn him a story for tomorrow. His chin tilted high to sell bravado. His weight tipped too far forward, telegraphing intent before his fist left his side. Chuck didn't wind up, didn't square off. He shifted a fraction, hips settling, feet steady as if on rails. His answer was a straight right, compact and exact, no more than 6 inches of travel. The sound it made wasn't dramatic. Not a crack, not a roar, just a dull, final thud, like a door latching shut. Max's eyes lost focus. His body kept going without him, knees buckling as though the floor had tilted. He collapsed onto one, palms smearing against the sticky boards. Blood traced his lip before he even understood what had happened. The room didn't erupt at once. It needed a heartbeat to process the sight. A pool cue rolled soundlessly into a corner pocket. The bartender froze with napkins in hand. Even the neon outside seemed to steady its flicker. Then noise broke loose. Shouts, whistles, shock laughter from throats that didn't know how else to react. A woman at the bar gasped into her palm. Someone muttered, "Oh God," half awe, half prayer. Max touched his mouth, pulled back a crimson smear, and stared at it like it belonged to someone else. His confusion was raw, almost childlike. When he looked up, it was into the same calm eyes he'd mocked minutes earlier. Chuck hadn't moved after the strike. No follow-up, no flourish. He stood rooted, breathing even, his posture unchanged. He looked like a man who had swatted a fly, not dropped a fighter. "You wanted a lesson," he said quietly. "Here it is." The words weren't loud, but they carried to every corner. The bar hushed again, sound drained out as quickly as it had surged. Max tried to grin, pride clawing its way back onto his face. "Lucky touch," he rasped, his jaw stiff around the words. His friends shifted uneasily, unwilling to step in, unwilling to step away. He pushed himself upright, thighs shaking with effort. His shoulder sagged, but he rolled it back, trying to regain theater. He bounced lightly, too high, the floorboards complaining beneath him. Chuck didn't move. His stillness was louder than Max's swagger. Frustration ignited in Max's eyes. He feinted a slap, aiming for sting over damage. Chuck angled his head a degree, letting the air absorb the blow. No counter, just denial. That refusal hurt worse than a punch. Max's pride forced escalation. He stepped in hard, pawed with his left, set the right. His footwork betrayed him. Beer heavy, pride heavy, out of rhythm. Chuck shifted once more, small as a breath, guiding the wild arm past. His left hand touched ribs with the precision of a scalpel. Max gasped, the sound involuntary, ripped out of him. The crowd responded with a low groan, recognition passing from body to body. Not excitement, understanding. Chuck's voice again. Stop! Not a command, an invitation. Max shook his head, blood bright on his teeth. Pride had him now, not sense. He squared his shoulders, tried to find a new angle, and threw himself forward. The punch he finally committed to carried speed, but no timing. Chuck wasn't there when it landed. The fist hit only air, its weight dragging Max further off balance. Time stretched, the crowd inhaled as one. Max's knee struck the floorboards again, harder this time, rattling glass on the bar. He caught himself with a palm, leaving a red smear where blood mixed with spilled beer. His breath came in ragged gulps, chest heaving. The bartender finally spoke, voice flat. That's enough. Chuck didn't echo him. He raised one hand, palm open. Not warning, offering. Walk away. The boxer's gaze flicked from Chuck to the crowd. Phones hovered higher now, their screens glowing. His friends stared at their shoes. Pride waged its war against survival in the lines of his face. He started to rise. Relief spread across the room like a current. Boots scraped back, bodies eased. Someone exhaled so loudly it drew stares. Then his heel slipped in the ring of beer from his own glass. His arms flew up to steady himself, fists half-formed. The crowd gasped, misreading balance as intent. The mistake sparked his pride again. His chin lifted. The circle tightened. The room leaned. Chuck didn't advance. He stayed exactly where he was, waiting, letting silence press harder than any blow. Max rolled his shoulders, set his stance once more. The tremor in his thigh betrayed him, but his grin held. He breathed deep, sharp through the nose, trying to summon another round of courage. Phones steadied, lenses aimed. The bartender set the napkins neatly in a row. And the bar, every patron, every breath, hung at the edge of the next moment, caught between two possibilities, that Max would take the exit offered, or that he'd demand another lesson, harsher than the first. Max forced himself up again, red-faced from blood and shame, hair plastered with sweat. His chest heaved like a bellows, and every breath came jagged, but his pride wouldn't let him stay down. He staggered to his feet, wobbling, then snapped his head back and roared, "I'm not finished!" The bar erupted in noise, the kind that made the walls feel thinner. Half the crowd wanted blood. They hollered, clapped, stomped their boots. "Come on, Max! Again!" The other half whispered to each other, voices sharp with unease. "He's gonna break that kid if this keeps up." For a moment it felt less like a bar, and more like a small-town arena. The air vibrated with divided loyalties, cheers clashing with warnings, the hum of fear woven into the noise. Max raised his fists again, but his stance was gone, broken by fatigue and drink. His movements had lost the crisp edges of a trained fighter. His arms flailed wide, his footwork sloppy, each step dragging like he was pushing through mud. Chuck didn't press him. He even stepped back, opening the distance, giving him room. His stillness carried more weight than any punch, as if he were letting the young man choose which path to walk. The retreat looked like mercy, but it radiated control. Max lunged with a furious series of wild punches, shoulders snapping too fast for his hips to follow. Each strike sliced the air, missing by inches, whistling past a target that wasn't there. Chuck's head moved just enough. Tilts, slips, pivots. Never hurried, always measured. The old fighter's calm footwork looked almost lazy compared to the frenzy, but every dodge carried authority. The crowd felt the rhythm shift. Cheers broke apart into fragmented gasps. A young man holding his phone lowered it, realizing he wasn't watching a brawl anymore. He was watching something closer to a lesson. Max roared again, throwing another hook, too wide, too desperate. Chuck caught his wrist mid-swing. The room froze as the older man leaned in, lips near the young fighter's ear, his voice so low it forced the silence to deepen. "You're not fighting me," he whispered. "You're fighting your ego." Max's knees nearly buckled. His eyes darted side to side, searching the room, but no one laughed. No one jeered. The crowd's noise had dissolved into a tense hush. Even the bartender leaned forward, hands flat on the counter, as if the words themselves had landed harder than the punch. Max yanked his arm free with a grunt, but for the first time his shoulders sagged, his fists wavering at chest level. His face twisted between rage and something he didn't want to admit. Recognition. He charged again, more out of stubbornness than strategy, swinging a flurry. Chuck didn't counter. He just kept slipping, sidestepping, turning each punch into a ghost of itself. The space between them became a mirror. Max flailing against himself, Chuck calm enough to let him. The crowd murmured in awe. One older man whispered, "He's not even fighting back." A woman near him shook her head, eyes wide. "He doesn't need to." Max's breath grew louder than the shouts. He gulped air, his chest rising high, arms dropping lower with every swing. His strength drained faster than his fury could refill it. He stumbled after missing another right, his hands falling limp at his sides. Chuck stepped in just close enough to place a single hand on the young man's shoulder. Not a shove, not a strike. Just a steady palm pressing down lightly, like a father stilling a child. The gesture silenced the bar. Max stood there panting, sweat dripping off his chin, his fists open now, empty. His face crumpled with the realization he wasn't losing to Chuck's fists. He was losing to himself. The crowd knew it too. Their cheers had gone. No one wanted to see more. The spectacle had ended, replaced by a weight that hung heavy in the air. The fight wasn't about blows anymore. It was about pride unraveling in public. Chuck said nothing further. His hand stayed on the young man's shoulder, steady, unshaking, the only anchor in the room. And in that stillness, the lesson cut deeper than any knockout could have. The bar, once rowdy and split, had become silent, a single audience watching not a fight, but a transformation in progress. The words struck harder than a fist. "You're not fighting me. You're fighting your ego." They echoed in Max's skull, louder than the ringing in his jaw. For the first time all night his fists hovered without purpose. His chest caught mid-breath, suspended between attack and surrender. And in the gap, the bar froze with him. Nobody coughed, nobody clinked a glass. The crowd was a single held breath, waiting to see which way he'd break. Max tore his wrist free, stumbling back a step. Pride stitched over the wobble. He rolled his shoulders, trying to paint strength over exhaustion. But the paint was thin. His next punch was all outline and no substance, telegraphed from his shoulder, his feet sluggish beneath him. Chuck tilted his head and let the glove slide past air. Max doubled down with volume and movement. He unleashed a flurry, or what should have been one. 3 punches that unraveled after the second. His feet fought each other, his balance slipping. He jabbed, he hooked, he swung, and every time he met only space. Chuck moved with quiet precision, letting the mistakes collapse under their own weight. The room's noise drained away. All that remained was the soft hum of machines, the ice bin rattling, a neon light buzzing overhead, the muffled vibration of a phone left forgotten on a table. It was no longer a crowd watching a fight. It was a jury, listening for the verdict in the silence. Max's breath turned into ragged scraping sounds. His shirt clung to him, soaked, heavy. He drew air in desperate gulps, ribs heaving like a man too long underwater. He swung again, slower now, softer, running on fumes. Chuck's shoulder shifted, a quiet parry, and the strike dissolved before it had meaning. Arms dropping, Max bent slightly, hands sagging below his chest. He wanted to raise them again, but his muscles no longer believed his pride. No one laughed. The bartender leaned forward, both palms pressed flat to the counter. A woman by the door clasped her hands like she was praying without realizing it. The old men had gone still, their folded arms a kind of silent approval. Max threw a wide hook out of habit. It landed in nothing, his legs shuddering beneath him. He stumbled on the sticky boards where spilled beer tugged at his soles. His eyes shone with heat that had nothing to do with anger. An almost tearful brightness he swallowed down with clenched teeth. Chuck didn't close in. He didn't need to. His stillness radiated more authority than any strike. His breathing stayed steady, measured, patient. "Enough," he said at last. Max shook his head, because that was the only answer left that still looked like strength. He tried to raise his fists, but they dragged, heavy as stone. A final jab sputtered forward, more gesture than punch. Chuck met it with 2 fingers, brushing it aside. It was a dismissal, not a defense. Silence thickened, pressing against skin. It felt like the air itself was listening. The baseball game on the muted TV played to no one. Even the neon seemed to dim, tired of humming. Max froze. Not because he wanted to, because there was nothing left to give. Rage had burned itself out. What remained was the hollow place where truth seeps in. He looked at the man in front of him and saw no mockery, no cruelty, just room. Chuck stepped forward, calm, and placed a hand on his shoulder. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't force, it was a steadiness Max hadn't known he was missing. The contact traveled deeper than any blow. The bar was still. You could hear the faint rattle of the ceiling fan's chain, the clink of a bracelet sliding down a wrist. Someone swallowed audibly. No one dared interrupt. Max tried to force words through his raw throat. "Again," he croaked, but the sound betrayed him. It was thin, cracked, empty of conviction. The syllable died in the air. Chuck's hand didn't leave his shoulder. "Not with me," he said softly. The words shifted Max's posture without moving his body, turned him slightly toward something he hadn't faced all night. Himself. He looked past Chuck to the faces around him. The phones weren't raised now. They hung loose at people's sides, recording forgotten. The hungry gleam of entertainment had drained away, replaced with something harder to carry. Pity, concern, respect. His friends stared at the floor. Even the bartender's eyes held no judgment, only steady understanding. Max tried to summon a grin, to pace the night into a story he could control. "I went toe-to-toe with a legend, just slipped up." But the lie never reached his lips. His chest sank with a long, rough exhale. It wasn't surrender, not exactly. It was human. Chuck lifted his hand away, returning the weight. The gesture wasn't triumph, it was permission. Max's shoulders sagged, squared, sagged again. He nodded once, tiny, almost imperceptible. He turned toward the stool where his jacket lay crumpled. It looked less like a trophy now and more like a place gravity had been saving for him. His knees bent halfway, then straightened again, pride clawing for one last stand. The bar leaned with him, caught between endings. A friend shifted as if to help, then stopped, realizing help would only take something away. Someone whispered, "Let him do it himself." Max looked at his hands, bloody, swollen, raw. He flexed his fingers and felt nothing useful. He lifted his gaze to Chuck, searching for contempt and finding none. Only space, only the chance to choose differently. His arms dropped fully at his sides, hitting his thighs with two exhausted thuds. The sound echoed louder than cheers. The silence softened. The neon buzzed back to life. The ice machine exhaled. Someone at the back slid their phone into a pocket. Chuck stepped back half a pace, giving room. The old men uncrossed their arms. The woman by the door unclasped her hands. The bartender picked up a towel and folded it neatly, ready to offer, but not impose. Max's breathing slowed. His eyes cleared. He reached for the stool, missed once, then found it. His fingers clutched the edge, knuckles trembling. He didn't sit right away, but the weight in his body said he would. Chuck's voice came one last time, steady, patient. "Stop before the hurt stops meaning anything." The words sank into Max like water through dry soil. His shoulders dipped, his head bowed, and the nod that followed was small but true. The crowd finally let itself breathe again. Not applause, not jeers, just the sound of life resuming, softer, heavier, changed. And in that fragile stillness, everyone knew the fight was over, though no bell had rung. Max sat heavily on the stool, the fight gone from his limbs. His knuckles were raw, his lips split, but the damage wasn't what weighed on him. It was the silence pressing down. He stared at his hands as if they belonged to someone else, the boy inside him suddenly exposed. The bartender slid a folded towel across the counter. No announcement, no fuss, just there if Max wanted it. He pressed it to his mouth, pulled it away, saw pink blooming through the cloth. A woman nearby pushed napkins toward him. An older man nudged another stool close, wordless gestures of care that made the air feel heavier. Chuck didn't move to claim victory. He stood steady, hands at his sides, his calm filling the space where violence might have lived. The lesson was already written. He had no need to underline it. Max cleared his throat, voice rasping. "I wanted to show I was strong." The words were small, almost swallowed by the hum of neon. He tried again, louder this time, but no less fragile. "Turns out I'm just a kid." Nobody clapped. They only listened. The honesty stung sharper than any strike. He looked around the room. Phones were down, faces sober, the hunger for spectacle gone. His friends hovered nearby, unsure whether to step in or shrink away. The bartender set a glass of water beside him and left it there. No charge, no comment. Max sighed, shoulders slumping. "I thought if I took something from you, I'd be someone in here," he admitted, eyes flicking toward Chuck. "I guess I wanted a shortcut." Chuck's answer was silence. Not cold, not cruel, just space. It let Max own his words. From the back of the room came a tentative clap, then another. Slowly it spread, not the roar of a crowd, but the steady rhythm of respect. They weren't applauding a knockout, they were acknowledging restraint. The night had ended without broken bones, without police, because one man had chosen not to prove what didn't need proving. Max shook his head at the sound, embarrassed. "Don't clap for me," he muttered, pressing the towel harder to his lip. But the clapping wasn't for him. Chuck gave a single nod, almost imperceptible, then turned toward the door. He passed through the crowd without slowing, without soaking in the attention. At the threshold, he paused, catching the cool night air, then stepped out. The bell above the door gave a soft ring, and he was gone, boots fading into Texas dark. Max kept his eyes on the door long after it closed. Finally he smiled, tired and thin, the kind of smile you give when truth leaves no other choice. He picked up the water, drank deep, and let the towel rest in his lap. Around him the bar began to breathe again. Chairs turned back, conversations picked up, the baseball game regained its sound. A man chalked his pool cue, someone laughed too loudly at a joke, life reassembled itself in small pieces. But the atmosphere was changed. Not bigger, not louder, truer. The people who had witnessed it carried something they hadn't expected to find between spilled beer and neon. Max flexed his bruised hands, staring at the swollen knuckles. They looked less like weapons now, more like tools he didn't yet know how to use. He whispered, mostly to himself, "I'll be better." No one answered. They didn't need to. The lesson was his alone. And if a voice had spoken for the room, it would have sounded quiet, almost reverent. Real strength isn't beating others. Real strength is facing yourself, and doing it before the damage stops meaning anything at all.